Hi everyone, this is Dina here, and this is a channel about remote work. And today we're talking with Ashley, who is a remote worker, an American living in Philippines, and working remotely with companies from different countries. So let's talk to her and see what she's got to share with us. I'm really excited. Thank you for joining us today, Ashley.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited.
um, just for an intro kind of thing, what do you do for your job, and how did you end up being a remote worker?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to share that with you. So, right now, I am a remote worker. I work at TestLauncher as a test strategist, so like quality assurance or software testing. I founded on Angel's List, which was a website for startups, and I came across it, and I thought it was really interesting, and I applied, and 2 years later, 2 years and a couple months later, now I'm here. I am. I'm still working there. The reason I had to find the remote work was my husband, now husband, he was my boyfriend at the time. He got relocated from the U.S. to the Philippines, and so I wanted to go with. We wanted to do this adventure together. Wanted to travel, and then the job that I had then did not have remote as an option. Did not have telecommute as an option. So I made it a journey to find a job that would allow me to visit my family in America and work remotely in America, but also be in the Philippines and work remotely here. And that's how I came across Test Launcher with that schedule, and that's worked. And that's pretty much my story on how I got there or got here.
Oh, it's interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's really nice that you get to spend the time with your family. I do love this side of being a remote worker as well, because it's really hard when you have to choose between your loved one, your one loved one, and the other, and this way
Right.
you don't have to choose, right, and be together whenever you want.
Exactly. Lets me visit back and forth that I wouldn't have been able to do if I would have had an office job. So
That's cool. Yeah. All right. And how long did it take for you to find a remote job? Were you still in the States when you were looking for it?
yeah, I was still in the States. Took it took me a few months. I passingly started looking, I want to say in March, the year that I found the job. I started looking in March. I applied, looked for a few different things, interviewed for a couple of different things. I actually had two interviews at the same time. I with Test Launcher, I was going back and forth with another company. I had four interviews with the other company,
Wow.
and then I had already moved. Yeah, I had
A lot.
actually I had my first interview with Test Launcher, and then I moved like 2 days later, and then I was in the Philippines, and I was like, hopefully that something sticks because I'm here. Like this is what's happening.
It's
And then I got a
happening,
phone call. Yeah, and then I got a phone call like a week later with the offer. But it was a lot of interviewing and a lot of just putting myself out there. So
Oh yeah, I can feel it. I know how it is. It was
yeah.
similar to me. I've gone through a similar experience. Now, what about did you notice any differences switching from an office to a remote job? What were the highlights for you in both of ways of working?
Yeah, lots of both have great highlights. The highlights of working in the office, you definitely build that camaraderie that is just from sitting next to somebody or sitting in the same area as someone. When you're running into an issue, something as simple as is your communications tool down? Like you can just say that to the person sitting next to you or the person there, hey, is this down for you? And they can just quickly say, yes, it's down for me. Or instead of like
Yeah.
having to type it up and ask, is anyone else experiencing this? So those types of camaraderie, or you can come in and say like, hey, how was everyone's weekend? And or hey, team, how's it going when you walk in the office? Um, so you have those, and then you build relationships more because you're going out to lunch with peers, or different events. Because when you're working in an office, you're typically living in the same area. So oh, Friday night they're doing this. Does anyone want to go? And then so you're building those out of work relationships as well. Versus when you're working from home, those
Mhm.
highlights, like clearly you don't have to commute. There's no train, there's no bus, there's no traffic with the cars. So there's no commute. Like it takes me 10 minutes to get ready for my day. I wake up, brush my teeth, quickly get dressed, and then like I'm starting my day. I don't have to calculate traffic time or accidents. Where my mother, she still commutes, and she commutes for like an hour to an hour and a half, just depending on traffic,
Oh,
which
wow.
takes, yeah, it's like a large part of the day, which that I don't have that. So that gives me more time at home. So I can, quickly grab my lunch, or quickly, I can start dinner. I can step away for a 10-minute break, a 5-minute break, start rice in the rice cooker, and
Okay.
then go back to work, and then wrap up my day. So those are definitely some of and there's no dress code additionally, as opposed to maybe work in the office, so I
Did you
can
used to have
wear.
a dress code in the previous office?
Yeah, they had a really, I would say, a strict dress code. So, you had to wear sleeves, and or a sweater, and different. Your hair couldn't be dyed, and
Oh, wow.
yeah. So
That's
that
strict.
it was a little. Yeah, you can have dyed hair, or a natural colored hair, and you couldn't paint your fingernails certain colors.
Or
So
like
when
you were
when you're
working
working.
with the customers as well? Like were your customer face?
I was actually not. Yeah, I was
Oh, you
actually
were not?
behind the scenes. Yeah, but it was still part of the culture, so you
That's
stick to that,
interesting.
which is fine.
Hmm.
But for me, like if I want to wear socks while I'm working, I'm wearing socks while I'm working, and I control the thermostat, which you don't necessarily have in an office. You're cold if and you don't get a choice. So.
Oh, I see. I see. All right. And in terms of like joining an office job and in a remote job, were there differences in the interviews, like how you applied for the job as well?
The interview itself was very similar. Like the questions, the layouts, you take a personality test, a strategy test. The biggest difference I would say was, yeah, typically when you're working in an office, you'll go into the office for the job interview. In this case, a lot of the job interviews are over the phone or Zoom, or however, whatever other communication tool they use, because you're not meeting face to face. So that was I think the biggest difference. Other than that, question wise, it was very similar.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I see. Did you prepare your resume in a different way for a remote job? Like, did you know that there might be differences in how companies perceive you and how they test you as a remote worker to be suitable for a remote position?
The biggest thing that I did to my resume, I highlighted, because in the role that I was in at the time, we were working with other. While my position was not remote, we did work with teams from all over different locations. So I just made sure to highlight that I had worked with teams who are located in other time zones before. While I didn't
Okay,
personally do that,
that's important.
I wanted to like showcase that I could do it. That was probably the biggest part. And then just make sure it says you're open to anywhere versus just, your town that you're living in.
Oh, I see. Okay. And in terms of like management, is the management in remote teams and office teams is it different? Like the style, how people approach work and managing people?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they're similar but different. It's definitely similar. They are different because when you're working in an office, you might have a manager walk by, or just stop by and say, "Hey, what are you working on?" And you say, "This is what I'm working on," or you quickly bop into their office and say, "I'm running into this issue," or "I'm not running into this issue," or "Have a good afternoon. I'm leaving for the day." Whatever. You don't always have that when working remotely. Um, those quick interactions, which is fine. You still have the formal, the one-on-ones and the meetings.
Hmm.
The biggest cultural difference I would say is just direct, especially being like an American working for a remote company. Just Americans are more, or I would say, in the experiences that I have, they're more straightforward. More, no, not a lot of like fluff around if they want you to do something, or if you're doing something wrong, they just say you're doing it wrong. So sometimes I have to ask, am I doing this wrong or am I doing this right? Because
You mean with the
sometimes,
Canadian side
yeah,
of
yeah,
how?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
like I have to say, hey, am I doing this wrong? Or because I'm not used to a gentle, I guess a gentle approach. I'm used to just saying, "Hey, this is incorrect," and then, "Okay,
You have to
I'll
live
fix
with it.
it."
It's okay.
Yeah, like okay,
I
exactly.
hear you. Okay, that's actually a good a path to my other question that we were discussing when we were preparing for this video. This difference between for us when we leave outside, North America, to us, Canada and US, they seem pretty similar because like they're both westernized, very like business-like countries. But for you,
Mhm.
you're saying that there's difference, right, in working in an American company and in a Canadian, because you had experience working as with the American company, and now you're working in a Canadian company. So could you expand on that and tell us a little bit more? What other differences do you see?
Yeah, the biggest difference, well, the biggest difference, and we'll talk a little bit more further in the interview about it. But one of the biggest differences is there's things that are not taken into consideration because they don't have to be, such as healthcare, and we'll touch on
Okay,
that.
the
But
legal
you,
things, yeah.
yeah, the legalities of working, being a full-time worker versus being a full-time worker in the United States. Sometimes there's different legalities, but culturally wise, like I said, just the straightforward. There is, and I don't want to say that this is all American versus US, but there's definitely, I find where I'm currently at, there's like a lot of transparency when I'm communicating with the CEO or with my management
Mhm.
team. I'm never leaving guessing, what's going on. They're fully transparent, and I'm sure there are companies in the U.S. that are fully transparent as well. But sometimes in larger corporations, there's not as much transparency because there's a lot that happens behind the doors, so that's one of the really great things that I've found is there's just a lot of transparency, a lot of patience. I find working at a Canadian company versus maybe a U.S. company, patience with my schedule. When I interviewed, I said, I might be in the Philippines. Is that going to be a problem? And he was like, no, I mean, we don't have anyone currently in Asia, but you could be the first.
Is this
So
first? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, so it was really cool. It was a very like patient and welcoming
Mm,
experience.
that's great, and it's a good thing that you pointed. It's more probably of a company culture, not like a American versus Canadian. That's like it's not going to be a rule, right? Because
Right.
there can be like indirect or direct companies in Canada in the same way as you said they can be in America. So it's like I think the question is more like stereotyping
Yeah.
more,
Right.
but I don't want to focus on that. That's a good point. So I
Right.
wanted to highlight that as well. It depends on the company, actually, on the company culture, and how you as a worker as well communicate, and what kind of communication you are building with your team. So thanks for saying that. That's really important. Uh, and you touched on the legality and all the legal things. Could you tell us a little bit about how is it for you being an American working for a foreign company, right? Or like, are you officially like employed? What's happening there? Like, how is it for you?
Well, I am technically a contractor, so I'm not a full-time employee as I think most Americans would be associated with. Contracting is it varies, at least for Americans. There's different types. What I'm on an indefinite contract. So I know a lot of other contracts have a start and
Sorry,
end date.
on what? I didn't get that.
Oh, so
What was that?
an indefinite contract.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So
So
the
it doesn't
contract that I'm
end.
on continues. Yeah, it doesn't end
Mm-hmm.
until either me or my management decide. And at that point, I think if the contract states like a 2-week notice or something.
Termination. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, termination. Other than that, so I know a lot of like US contracts typically say 3 months, 6 months,
Mm-hmm.
etc. That's not the case in my scenario. So I feel like I'm kind of in a gray area between a contractor and employee because my contract doesn't end. But there are things that make a difference, especially working like I touched on with Canadian. You don't have to worry about the healthcare. So this is something you have to worry about as a US when you're going into a contract, even if a contract in the United States, but a contract within an international team, you have to worry about the health insurance. Are you going to carry it? Is someone going to carry it else? Are you married? Is that person going to carry your health insurance for you, or are you going to be independent in purchasing your health insurance?
Mm-hmm.
On top of your taxes, some companies will offer the forms that you need. Mine's a little more trickier because I'm an American working for a Canadian company living in the Philippines. So my tax season is really, really crazy. And then, from my understanding, in the U.S. is one of the different, because we file our taxes. I know in some countries they do not have to file. So I think it just depends on the country. But with the U.S., you have to worry about the forms, having the proper forms, setting aside the money to pay the taxes, because you're not paying taxes when you get paid every month. So you have to make sure that you're setting
So
aside the money.
you pay them like once a year,
Yeah,
when
yeah.
the tax season comes. Okay, all right.
Yeah, so when the tax season comes, you'll fill everything out. It'll ask you how much you made, if you're self-employed, and some various other questions, and then it will calculate the percentage that you owe. So you
Mm-hmm.
definitely want to take that in consideration, because you don't want to work a whole year as a contractor and then find out
Right.
you owe maybe $5,000 or
And you
or
don't have
more
them.
or
You
more or
spend
less.
everything.
Yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. And so there's that, and then a retirement plan. Everyone wants to
Right.
retire. Is there a 401k, or is there a pension? Are you gonna have your own private, like that you're gonna own by yourself, that you're gonna create independently, or are you looking for a company that has those things? And those are the three biggest things I think as a contractor you have to take into consideration, because I think in the United States for full time, those are like the three things that are very much taken care of for you, versus when
So
you're a contractor, you kind of have to
when
take
you're
care.
working in the office, they are covering that for you in some way. I know that like
Most
they
of the
do
time, yeah.
provide some payment for your retirement plan, like they cover that, and like even they pay for you some money, right? And when you're working as a full-time employee, that's the same
Right.
way back here. And I basically need to take care of these kind of things myself as well. So
Got
yeah,
it. Okay.
it's pretty similar. Yeah, and in terms of like doing these things, like how hard are they to do like do you do it yourself, or do you outsource it somewhere to like to bookkeepers, or how do you approach that?
I try to take care of it myself. It's not always easy. The taxes have been probably the hardest, and then especially with getting married this last year, it's going to add another layer of complication. So I think when tax season starts in a few weeks, I think we'll probably hire someone this time around
Okay.
to make sure. But other than that, I try to take care of everything myself. I have my own personal retirement plan now, that I have the 401k, or not 401k, but an IRA set up. Um, and the health insurance I'm now under my husband. Luckily, I didn't have to take care of that too long
That's good.
by myself. But yeah, so the things you have to take care of, but you definitely have to like do research. If you're going to take care of yourself, you have to put a lot of, time, or know somebody
To
who is knowledgeable
investigate
about those
that,
things.
yeah, to
Yeah,
investigate it, yeah, for sure. And especially like when I started, there were no people working like this, like remotely for companies, but like having to take care of everything else themselves. And it was
right.
like really hard to find a person who would be a real person, not like an expert in this, and they would say it's possible. For me, that was quite hard to like believe it's possible and I can do it myself, and it's like manageable.
Right.
But now I think it's simple, like it's easy because I learned it, and it's like okay, it's
Yeah.
fine. You can do it. You can learn it. So it's good. Pretty similar. That's I like that we find a lot of similarities in on this kind of things that we struggle both with basically.
Yeah.
I think yeah.
Yeah. That's how I felt with investing. Like when I put it off, to be honest, for like 6 months, and then I was like, I need a retirement plan. Like I'm not getting any younger. Some type of an investment going, and then I'm putting
Mm,
money into, and I didn't know anything. And now, I mean, I would still consider myself a beginner investor, but at least I know more. I feel confident enough to create like a portfolio and feel that I'm
right.
putting the money in the right place. So, so
Exactly. Yeah.
you
And
learn.
you learn, and then when you're in charge of those kind of things yourself, you're doing the best for yourself, right? Like when the company is
Right.
managing that for you, you don't always know that that's the right investment that they're doing with your retirement money, or like how is it organized. but then when you're researching
Exactly.
everything, you're trying to find the best solution. And for example, the same with the medical insurance, right? The health insurance. When the company is set up with an insurance company, they usually provide that specific insurance company, and you
Right,
cannot
right.
choose because like that's what they're working with. And when you're a contractor, there is this benefit of being able to select from a specific it's just like a specific company, a health insurance
Oh
company that you
yeah.
like, right? And you can
Yeah,
afford, and
that's a good
you
point.
like the service. So I find like there are pros and cons, but like I think like in this way, I have more bonuses and more benefits than the struggles. The bonuses are better
Yeah.
than the struggles, so it's worth it.
Yeah, yeah, no, agreed, agreed. Yeah, no, I definitely agree.
That's cool. And what about? I forgot to ask you in the very beginning, like for an American like person, right, who is an American citizen, how hard is it to find a remote work? Like, is there enough of remote jobs in the States? How many people in your network are also working remotely? Is it a very common thing?
I think it's definitely more common now that
Oh,
COVID
yeah, with the pandemic.
happened. Yeah, with the pandemic, I think it's definitely more common. Before COVID, I did not personally know a lot of colleagues that worked remotely. I think my best friend, she would work from home 3 to 4 days a week, but she still had to commute 1 to 2 days a week into the
Hmm.
office. Um, Outside of that, I knew, maybe less than 5 people personally in my network who maybe worked remotely. Now with COVID, people work from home, but I find that there's more leniency. I see more postings and more where it's indefinitely remote or indefinitely. So I think there's companies are more open to hiring. I think it was really challenging beforehand because you're not only competing as an American, you're not only competing, let's say it's a remote job, but it's limited to US, Americans with the proper visas. You're not only competing with those who are from maybe the town you live in or the state you live in, but you're now competing with people nationally, people who have gone to colleges from all over, or they have so many different experiences and backgrounds. And then when you go like international, so what we're currently doing, I'm not only competing with people from America, but I'm competing with people from all over the world who have
Right.
vast amounts of knowledge, and not even that, but what they offer. And then the one thing as an American you have to remember is, and we might talk about this a little bit more, I'm not sure, but you have to remember your salary versus um, the one thing I always talk about, because some people say, oh, well, because I say, my schedule's a little bit different when I'm in Asia, because, sometimes I have meetings that are on the East Coast, and that
Hmm.
results in late night meetings, and I'm fine with that. But people say, well, can't you find a remote job in Asia? And I could find a remote job in Asia, I'm sure, but typically they don't want to pay an American salary. Like, you have
Right.
to worry
Right.
about salary transitions, and that was one of the hardest things, is just you have to worry about where you're working, and then the money that goes with it. Um, you definitely have to take that into consideration. But yeah, it was difficult. Not too difficult because I found work, but
Mhm.
it was difficult in the beginning because you just have a really hard competitive. Like I was saying at the beginning, I had 4 interviews with a company prior to where I am now, and I was right there. I thought I was going to get the job offer. Like 4 interviews, I met with
Yeah.
everyone on the team, and then it came down to, like, I believe me and one other person, and it was the other person. I suppose I got it, but I mean, it was highly competitive, and
Hmm.
there's yeah, it was a very competitive market. So that was definitely a challenge for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I hear what you're saying about, excuse me. Now, I hear what you're saying about the competition when everybody's talking about remote work, they're saying, oh, there are so many remote work positions available out there. But like when you go, as you said, you're not only competing now with people from your neighborhood, right, who are going to be working in that particular
Right.
company, but you're competing either nationwide or like in like Russia and the US, for example, there are large companies, even if we're talking nationwide, right? You get so much competition, and then once a company goes fully remote, then there's no way they even read your
Right.
resume because they get so many
Right.
applications, and I don't know how they process it. I used to work for a company that was I was helping with HR and recruiting, and we would get so many applications we wouldn't be able to process it manually. We had to write some code to
Wow.
basically filter it automatically first, to search for the keywords and just shortlist the ones that had the needed values, the needed words, keywords, and then process manually the ones that were left. So I can relate to that. That's there's not only a sort of an advantage, but there's also a downside of being able to work with like applying for a remote job.
Right. That you actually reminded me of what was it? With the job. What I noticed when I was applying for remote work 2 years ago, I found that whenever the opportunity arose, if you were like submitting your resume and then they had like a blurb that was like, "Tell me why you're excited about the job," if I pasted my cover letter, I barely ever got a call back. But if I typed something genuine and I typed, "This is why I'm excited about your company," or "This is why I'm excited about this position," I would say majority of the time I at least got an interview versus just the cover letter. So that reminded me,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like maybe that's, caused it to stick out a little bit more than just pasting the cover letter. Did you have
Yeah.
difficulty? Um,
Um, I was having difficulty finding my first remote job, like
mhm.
before I joined TestLauncher, because I wasn't experienced in how to search for a remote job, what they wanted, what kind of skill they wanted. So that was kind of hard. I think it took me about a year to find my first remote job. But then the second one, I was also involved in recruiting, so I knew, and it was an American company, so I also knew like what the American companies were searching for, what kind of skills they wanted, what kind of culture they wanted. So I tried to highlight that in my resume, saying that I know this culture, I know the skills, I know how startups work. So I tried to use it as a competitive advantage in my resume, and that's
Oh, that's a good
basically
idea.
I guess it worked because I did have two interviews, one other interview, and TestLauncher was just faster to offer me the job.
Yeah,
In the end, I just ended up messaging the other company saying, "Hey, I think I found the company that I wanted to work with, and thank you for the interview." So they never got back to me. So
got it. That's cool. That's a cool story.
thanks. And you mentioned the COVID restrictions and like how it like changed the remote um, market, right, with jobs. But in terms of like your work and lifestyle, how did the COVID affect you, and where were you when it started, and where you are now?
Got it. I was physically in two different places, I think, when COVID started, because when it was started in China in January, I was actually traveling. I traveled back to the U.S. for a wedding, so I was there for 2 weeks. Debated on staying at the time because it was the beginning of February. Nobody really knew too much. And then I made like a decision to fly back to the Philippines because my husband was still here. And then we went into lockdown in March, and that changed everything because he was working in the office. The whole reason we live in the apartment we live in is because it's literally across the street from his used to be office. So he would walk into the office every day. I would work. I would have my little work area, and I would always say like a concert because I could put music on and just work. But now we bought a loft, or we didn't buy it, we're renting a loft. And uh, at the time when we signed the lease, he was working in office. Wasn't really an issue. But now with COVID, we're both working at home, and this is something that we never planned on. So now we're sharing the space. We're
Mm-hmm.
co co-working coworkers together.
Co-working. Oh, you missed the office.
Yeah.
There you go. You got the office.
Yeah, yeah, but he's in meetings all day long, so I have to take that into consideration. So, now I use headphones versus, just putting the music on. And uh we both have to take, so when we're both in meetings at the same time, we have to separate. And then because we're in a loft, we don't have that designated space to, shut a door and
Mm.
for privacy and quiet. So we have to, separate. One person goes upstairs, one person goes downstairs, and then we just apologize a bunch for the background noise when we have conflicting meetings. And that's probably the biggest thing, because we didn't count on that. We didn't count on, co-sharing space and
Mhm.
working, and our schedules are very different. So he works like 3 a.m., sometimes as late as 3, 4 p.m. And I'm working, yeah, I work like 6 a.m. to like 3 or 4. And then I, have my evening meetings that are at 9 and sometimes 11. So he's in bed, and then and then he'll wake up at 3, and I'm trying to get my beauty sleep to at
Just
least like a
now.
full sleep. Yeah. So sometimes I have to be like, can you just be quiet? Like, I know you're in a meeting, but you're so loud. So sometimes, we had to definitely take that into consideration, just the space that was not being used. And now, and I can't just
Mhm.
go into like a co-sharing, location that they have in different places, because they're closed. They're not allowing people to just go
Mhm.
work
Mhm.
in, the coffee shops. A lot of the coffee shops have limited capacity, or no eat in or dine in. So I can't just go
Mhm.
to a coffee shop and work there either. So those are
Yeah,
probably the
that
two
sounds
biggest, and just the
difficult.
lack of
Yeah.
private working space. Yeah.
How long is the lease? Like, how long do you have to stay in this loft?
It's up until March. Our lease is up, and then we have to decide if we're gonna move back to the United States, or if we're gonna stay out here in the Philippines, because he's now fully remote as well. So we have to make that
Yeah.
decision. But I would definitely like a door
And
to
or
be able to shut.
yeah,
Yeah.
like the pandemics taught us so much about like how we live, right? And how we share the space. Because I also never thought that, being a remote worker, well, I would spend my off time outside all the time. Like I would only come back
Exactly.
home to sleep. And when the lockdown happened, I was like, okay, now my work is home and my leisure is at home. Because like when you're working in the office, right, you find pleasure in staying at home. But when you're working
Agreed.
at home, you don't find pleasure staying at home even more. Maybe like once in a while, but I'm sort of an outside person. I like to go skiing. I like to go
Same.
partying. Meeting people, gathering together, concerts and stuff. But when the pandemics happened, it's like, oh well, we're locked in like one room apartment together.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a change. And you gotta figure out the ways. But I'm lucky enough to have a door. Like in the kitchen, we have a door to lock it, like close it, and actually like
That's
have
good.
two
Yeah.
separate spaces to speak. Um, so that's good. And I do remember you recommended a really good application for noise cancellation that you found. Can you tell a little bit about it?
Yeah, it was called Crisp, KRISP. There's a free version and a paid version, but the free version, it's like 120 minutes a week, I believe, and you just install it and it cancels the background noise. He tried it first, because he could hear me in the background, and no one at work could hear me. I've used it a few times. I've run into a little bit of trouble with Zoom, but other than that, when I've used other applications, I've used it for Microsoft Teams, and you guys are always able to hear me, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, because we
I
always have a
didn't notice a
fan
difference.
going too. Yeah, good.
Are you using it right now?
No, not right now. No, no, no. I
Okay.
no, I don't have I don't, because but when I'm in the evening meetings, I always have a fan on, and it's kind of loud. So maybe if you tell me you can hear it later, I don't see.
I never heard
Okay,
anything. Like you were saying that
good.
there's a light, like you were apologizing for the loud background, but I don't remember
Yeah.
a situation when it was loud on your end. So,
Yeah. I think like there was one time you and I did like a one-on-one, or like a meeting that was like early on my end and late on your end, and he was in the background, I think. And then
okay.
uh yeah, with
Yeah,
other
but you
colleagues.
said it was
Usually when it's
normal.
my morning. Yeah, in the evening it's usually quiet, but because he's done for the day.
I
So
see.
it's my domain. But yeah, same. I can definitely relate to the lockdown, Dina, because I wanted to go outside so bad, and we were not allowed to go out at all. I don't know if you had similar, but going outside was very restricted, so I couldn't even go for a walk for a long time. And it's just like I was like pacing in my house, like I felt so like it's just pacing back and forth, trying to get like exercise in, and
Yeah.
I was just watching so much Netflix, more Netflix than than I wanted to watch.
Oh, so sorry to hear that you had to go through this. Well, it wasn't that bad
We
back
all did.
there. In Russia, the government is more concerned with the economics going down with the pandemic, so they released it was a lockdown for I think a month or something. That was like
Oh wow.
sure that we
Okay.
were not allowed to do that, but that was in the big cities. Um, but still, people would still go out. Like it wasn't enforced in any way. Like they wouldn't do a fine or any like they wouldn't put a fine on you or anything for leaving
Oh
the
wow.
apartment. Only when you were infected with the COVID. But
Oh, okay.
I was making a conscious decision of staying home and not going out too much because it was too risky. I have parents who I visit, but like I didn't want to put them endanger them. So
Right.
that and that basically got us locked in the apartment, even though there was no official sort of or restriction to go out, but we were decided to limit our to sort of self isolate and stay away from that. Yeah,
Yeah, we
but
did
it's
similar. After they lifted and we could go outside, I think we would just go for walks every day, and we were still not really going anywhere until most recently is when we would go. But we were for a long time we were just going to the grocery store and,
yeah,
and going for walks, and that was it, nothing else.
and then you have to wash everything, like the food and everything.
We
I hate
did,
it.
we did.
Yeah. But I'm happy that it's coming to an end, hopefully soon. So
Yeah,
hopefully people can.
hopefully.
Yeah. Thank you, Ashley, for sharing everything you told us. It was so many insights that I wrote down for myself, actually, and it's nice to hear that people on the other side of the world ran into the same kind of struggles and they were searching for jobs and what kind of insights you get from working remotely. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right, and that's it for today, guys. Please click like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the interview, and I'll see you soon in my next video. Bye bye.